Are supply chains meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Jan-Willem Jannink is Managing Director and Global Sustainable Value Chain Lead with Accenture. Hello, Jan-Willem.
Bob, good meeting you today.
Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it. Now, Accenture has partnered with the United Nations Global Compact for its 12th annual CEO study about creating a more sustainable future. What are some of the big challenges to that goal that CEOs are seeing right now?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Great question. So the United Nations Global Compact basically focuses on non-state actors, enterprises, corporations, those kind of things, to make sure that also they contribute to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And indeed, we are conducting for the last 12 years the survey among CEOs. This year we did 2,600 CEOs, and had the opportunity myself also to have some interviews with them directly. It's always very insightful to learn and listen what's on their mind. I mean, some of the big topics that emerged this year was, first of all, the interpretation of the 2,600 CEOs that we're not trending enough in the right kind of direction to deliver on the 2030 United Nations Global Sustainability Development Goals. Yeah, we still have, of course, a good 7 years ahead of us, but I think there was a call out. We need to step up. We all need to step up and head in the right kind of direction. Mm-hmm. The second big ask for them was to say, we need regulatory support. To agree on one hand to be more global consistency in regulation, so especially for global organizations, so you don't have to deal with different kind of regulatory frameworks, but also global standards, for example, in the ESG reporting space, so that there is a uniform way to recognize that how companies are performing, and that it is more easier to compare how performance is being done. The third topic, and it was one that emerged really over the last iteration, was the topic of resilience. And resilience had really emerged as a topic that is on the priority list for CEOs to deal with. Yes, a big thing about resilience in the supply chains, and we now all know the stories, but it's not just in the supply chains. I mean, it's also in talent. How do you get access and retain talent? Capital markets. I mean, we had again the news this week from North America about the uncertainty in the financial markets and how to make sure you keep access to capital over there. But also markets itself. I mean, geopolitical changes, and we've seen many of them in the last year, also makes it certainly markets are not accessible anymore. How do you also have resilience in the markets you're servicing? So 3 big takeaways is, one, we need all to step up to make sure we hit 2030 United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. Can we basically get a more global and consistent framework from both a regulation and standards perspective? And thirdly, a big topic around resilience.
Let me ask you about that second one real quickly, as to how close are we to achieving some standard, some global standard by which all countries and all companies can meet? It would seem like the United Nations would be a natural source of that standard. Is it accepted as such, or are we on the road to that, or are there still some problems there trying to standardize and get everybody on the same page, so to speak?
Great question. And I think if we draw the parallel with, let's say, financial reporting, and it also took years and years to basically get to the level of maturity we have nowadays. Mm-hmm. On one hand, if we take that as our benchmark, I think we need to be realistic. It will take quite some time before we get to a uniform global reporting, data standards, regulatory framework. At the same time, I think all of us feel and sense the urgency, and also topics like, I would say, technologies nowadays a lot more commonly available. I think what we see is, again, more and more standards and regulation coming in. So let me call out 2 ones. One is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that is coming in force here in Europe. That's for companies that have more than 150 million of turnover within the EU. Those companies need to basically report on a predefined set of ESG standards as of 2024, 1 year from now. Yeah,
150 million euro, correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, just wanted to make sure we got that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yes, euro, of course. Yeah. But also companies that are maybe not headquartered within the EU, but have that kind of 150 million euro turnover, will have to start reporting from 2025 onwards. Now, there's many global organizations. That will in itself drive already a lot of requirements and transparency around what is indeed ESG performance, but not only what is ESG performance, how are you doing? Where's the data coming from? How is it being audited? How is it being collected? Yeah. Also, the SEC in North America is working on very similar kind of regulation around disclosure of ESG performance. I mean, that's still in the making. My understanding is that might get enforced later on this year or maybe next year. So we already see big markets indeed moving forward at getting these kind of reporting standards and regulation in place. That in itself, Bob, will I think help a lot to better understand what is actual performance, and for global markets like with capital, like supply chains, indeed to be able to understand where's the performance, where do I need to play.
Okay. Now, what are the CEOs telling you in this report about ways and the steps they're taking or the steps they're contemplating taking to reimagine and to reevaluate their supply chains with an eye toward greater sustainability and resilience?
Can I take three dimensions there? One is resilience need, one is, I think, circularity, and the third one is transparency.
Okay.
Like I said, I mean, resilience is an interesting topic. Resilience because it can get accomplished in so many ways. I think what we have seen with all the disruptions in supply chains is that companies, for example, in the supply chain had to take extra measures. And saying, okay, I need to have more stock just to be able to deal with fluctuation in my supply chain, which inherently results in higher working capital. Yeah. Or I need to change my mode of transport. If I could traditionally transport it by ship, it might take me 6 weeks. Yeah. Nowadays, I need to put it on an airplane because of, again, somewhere the disruption in my supply chain. The downside, of course, is higher cost to serve. Yeah. And also, depending on the mode of transport, potentially a higher emission footprint. So, I mean, companies are able to deal with disruptions and be very responsive to that part, but it often comes at probably three things. One, higher cost to serve, yeah, which again in highly commoditized global markets is something that isn't necessarily appreciated, and there's always a drive to say how can we do things better, yeah. But secondly, any kind of disruption resulting in delays in delivering a product to a customer results in a lower customer satisfaction. And that, of course, is we're all in the market to satisfy customers. So, I mean, a good example for me was always the automotive industry, depending on the semiconductor industry, and all the delays in the semiconductor industry resulting that car manufacturers couldn't get their products out to their customers, resulting in a lower customer satisfaction. But finally, also, it's a topic to me about the fact that if you have to reallocate more of your resources to deal with the disruption in your supply chain, yeah, those resources cannot focus potentially on other topics or even more strategic topics, like, for example, sustainability. So there's tension in organizations between where to focus on. To me, if I take the topic of circularity, it's a great example of to think about how could you potentially combine becoming more resilient with potentially the topic of sustainability. So where traditionally we might have a supply chain very linear from almost a mine site to a manufacturing facility to assembly to distribution, warehousing, your customer, you now need to start thinking about, can I somehow close the loop on those materials? And as a result, there's almost two moments when you engage with the customer. Once when you could use that product and deliver it to the customer, but also somewhere where you want to potentially take it back. And what that might mean is that you might want to have your manufacturing or logistic locations much closer to your markets. And having them close to your markets, again, a degree of localization, which again, if we look at my details here, I think 21% of the CEOs said they're really thinking about more localized supply chains, yeah, which circularity can play a big role in there.
Interesting. Yeah. Go on. I'm sorry. The last point.
Yeah, the final thing, Bob, and it goes back to your regulation question you talked about and the data transparencies. I think the final thing is also by these kind of, let's say, ESG disclosure rules that are coming in, they will drive more understanding and transparency about how does your supply chain function. Having that kind of transparency, again, allows you, again, as an organization, also to rethink, reevaluate your own supply chain. So to me, is yes, there's maybe cost in complying with the regulation, but at the same time, I think it gives a degree of transparency, which helps you to make decisions about how to reevaluate your own supply chain. So to me, again, the topic of supply chain sustainability go hand in hand.
Yeah, well, there's certainly no downside to visibility and transparency into one supply chain. There are multiple reasons to do that, of which sustainability is just one. But you said 21% were considering some degree of localization to build resilience. That's 1/5. That's not a huge number. You think it's practical though? I mean, it sounds great on paper to have local supply chains, but there are questions of access to multi-tier suppliers. There are questions of access to labor, to the cost of localization. And yet you think that there's still some promise there that is a possibility going forward with these companies.
I think a spot on observation. And I've been doing these United Nations Global Compact CEO surveys for the last few years. And to me, exactly the same thing. This year, it suddenly emerged as a topic, resilience, and resilience in combination with localization.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also need to look at this one in the context of probably two aspects. One, again, is the complexity in global supply chains. And more demands on, do you really understand what is happening in your global supply chain? We talked, yes, about the regulation part around, for example, ESG reporting, but also here in Europe, we've got legislation coming around. Can you assure that the product you're importing into Europe is not a result of deforestation anywhere around the globe? Can you do the same thing, for example, for modern slavery? What it requires companies to better understand their whole end-to-end supply chain. And if your supply chain goes around the globe multiple times, it's really hard to have that kind of understanding. And then it becomes the trade-off. Okay, yes, it might be 5 or 10% more cost efficient, but does it add up to the fact that we potentially do not really understand our supply chain, are less resilient, and potentially have certain liabilities that we don't want to be part of? Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I would also say, especially nowadays, we'll see again more in Europe than maybe in North America, is with the high energy prices. Certainly transport becomes, energy consumption and transport becomes a much bigger factor in your overall cost to serve. So if you can produce more locally, that might help. My final point, Bob, I think we also need to look at it in the context of more localized production technology. So if we really start thinking about the potential, for example, additive manufacturing, yes, maybe then that could form part of your mix of saying which kind of products can I produce more locally. And in a way, by the moment I can go to additive manufacturing, I can go to the batch of one manufacturing, which of course is the unique. That's utopia, because in that way you can truly customize that one to a customer needs.
Okay, so many factors to consider and so many complexities and nuances, and yet no question but that companies and CEOs do need to move forward to with these actions in order to reach the UN goals and in their own goals for sustainability, for circularity and the like. Jan-Willem Jannink of Accenture, thank you so much for enlightening us on what some of these big factors are and the progress that is being made. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Good speaking to you, and have a great day.